Hey everyone, and welcome into Under the Helmet. I'm your host, Josh VanDusen. Today we have a special guest with us. We've got my brother and retired Chief Pete VanDusen in the fire service. Pete, come on in and tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name's Pete VanDusen. Just recently retired from serving as assistant chief at our local fire department I worked there for 27 years, uh,
Okay.
30 years in the state system. Uh, Made it to the rank, like I said, of assistant chief, and got to the point where uh, I was ready to try something else for a change, and it made
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
Here I am.
So,
Uh,
so you had 30 years in the state service. What have you got in the emergency services altogether?
I was trying to think of that the other day, and I believe it's 38 years.
Right.
So,
It is.
by my recollection, I started as a junior member, small rural county north of here,
Yep.
in 1988,
Yep.
and that's pretty much what I've done my whole life, and
Yep.
hadn't taken a break. So,
Right. So, some of the things that we're going to talk about today, of course, if any of you guys are just joining the podcast for the first time, we discuss different aspects and different topics of first responder mental health. And having the opportunity to interview my brother and knowing some of his backstory and his personal life and like that, I felt it very, very necessary to discuss the topic of balancing your work stress and the compounded traumas that we deal with every day as a first responder, along with your personal stress and the things that you deal with in your personal life. Pete has had an exceptional amount of personal stress in his life to deal with. And I want to kind of look at some of that today and discuss with him how he has balanced that and managed it, and maybe some recommendations from him for responders out there that are dealing with some of the same things, because that's in one of our earlier episodes, we talked with Christine about how our lens gets clouded in as a first responder, the mud that gets thrown, the cracks that are there, the scratches and things like that, it decreases our view on life. And when you add in personal stressors, it gets even smaller and even smaller. So it makes it hard, especially like at home, when you have a spouse that is dealing with personal stress and their lens gets smaller, to get those lenses to line up where you can see each other clearly. And so that's why we have, I believe, why we have such a high divorce rate in the first responder family. So let's first off, Pete, let's discuss some of the techniques that you found effective. Coming from an administrator, just think about some of the techniques that you found effective in training new recruits. We'll start at the ground bottom, new recruits to prepare for their exposure to mental traumas.
so I had was blessed to come up through the training division as I
Right.
progressed in my career at Cleveland Fire Department. Um, we taught our rookies from square one. We didn't send them off to a state rookie school. We did everything
Right.
in house. And the first week during the orientation, in the first week of school, I always talk to our recruits about this in depth. You know, you talk about firefighter wellness, you talk about staying in shape, and all the things that come with being a firefighter. And as part of my typical talk, I always brought in the mental health side of it, and I did that even before there was a heightened awareness of first responders' mental health.
Right.
Um, Coming through the door, it's a given. You're going to see tragedy. You're going to see
Right.
bad stuff. When you sign on the dotted line, you're accepting that fact of life, and it's the nature of the job. You know, you um, you're the person that's being called when these tragedies happen, and these tragedies are going to happen. So
Yeah.
there's going to be car crashes every day. There's going to be uh, SIDS deaths every day. You're going to have all of
Right.
those things. So when you sign on the bottom line to do this for a living, you're accepting you're going to be exposed to these things. And that was pretty much how I started my talk. And I said, and we I would draw parallels to staying in shape physically and
Right.
preventing physical injuries. How do you prevent musculoskeletal injuries? Most common kind of injuries in any workplace. And that's with strength training and flexibility, right? Well, we
Right.
know those techniques to prevent you from blowing your knee out or hurting your back or,
Hmm.
those things to help reduce those risks. And I always talk to my rookies about, we've got to figure out individually how we can protect ourselves from the mental injuries as well. And
Hmm.
because inevitably we're going to be strained, we're going to be pushed to the breaking point if you do this long enough. Uh,
Right.
Back up just a little bit as part of the givens. When you start talking about these are facts, this job will change you. That's a given.
Right.
When you come into this, you've got to understand that your psyche will be changed. Your mental health will be challenged. All of that's a given, just like the fact of what we're going to see is a given. And
Hmm.
the big thing is how do we prevent that from doing irreparable damage to us, right? So we
Right.
know it's going to
Right.
change us. We know we're going to get scars. We know that um, our perspective is going to change and all that. But how do we prevent that from damaging us to the point that we're a whole different person?
Right.
And that was kind of the angle that I talked to our recruits about. And I encourage them to establish relationships with their coworkers, with people they could trust. And I encourage them personally to do it with people in the business, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
you think about, well, you tell your spouse everything. Well,
Hmm.
no, you don't, and that's
Yeah.
kind of one of the things. I'll tell my wife we had a bad call, and I
Yeah.
might tell her some cursory details, but I'm not going to tell her every little detail of this call. She doesn't need the trauma that I've experienced, right?
Yeah.
It's just like decontaminating before you come home, right? You don't
Yeah.
bring all that contamination home with you, or you try not to anyway.
Right.
So,
I've
uh,
thought about many times that we kind of do what we do is because we're kind of protectors of the community.
mhm,
Well, that
agreed.
brings a nature at home that we protect our loved ones at home too. We don't want to expose them to this. So,
Right.
like even with my boys now, that just the other day, I was at work and my oldest son called me and he was like, "How you doing, Dad?" And I was like, "Well, just the things are sucking right now, but we're okay." We had a pretty rough call, and he was like, "Well, what happened?" And I told him, I said, we had a difficult call, and he goes, "Well, tell me about it." And I was like, no, no, you're 18 years old. I'm not putting this in your head. I don't want
Right.
so sometimes we really act as protectors out at work, but we're also protectors at home. And the spouses have a difficult time understanding that. Because they want you to share your burdens as being somebody that loves you and cares for you, but they don't quite understand the weight of what we carry, and that we're not willing to put that on them also.
Right. So, and from that context, that's how I talk about recruits. About you've got to find somebody in the business that you can confide in, decompress to, etc.
Hmm.
And I've got two or three people that I've had those conversations with, and back and forth. Um, there's a couple people that I will call and say, "Hey, man, it's a bad day."
Yeah.
If they hadn't already called me, because a lot of times that's the way it
Right.
works. And
Yeah.
it goes two directions. But somebody that has been there and understands what you've seen, what
Yeah.
you've encountered, those feelings uh, of what if that you experience and like that.
Right.
And that would be the first thing that I would encourage our recruits to do is to find that mentor, confidant, what have you, that's in the business that understands it.
Right. We
Um,
had the benefit growing up of our dad being um, involved in emergency services for many years, and he was my go-to for a long time. And
right.
and so I've shared before that I have contacted my dad on many occasions. I mean, heck, I've called you on many occasions and just had to pop the valve and release a little bit of steam and just let it off. And
Yeah.
so it is extremely important to find somebody that's on the same level as you that can understand some of the stuff that we see and deal with.
Yeah. The other thing I told my rookies though is there's not a template for each individual how to handle
Exactly.
what you're going to encounter. What works for you might not work for me, and you have to kind of learn yourself.
Uh-huh.
And tie it back to the whole physical thing. Your workout routine might not be the workout routine that I need, physically.
Right.
And so, tie it back to that. You kind of have to figure out what works for you, but having that self awareness of what is working, what isn't working, and finding those solutions. And you take it back to even, I don't know how many critical incident stress debriefings you've been through. I've been through a handful of them in my
Mm-hmm.
career, but that's not for everybody, you know.
No.
And honestly, I personally, I don't know what the value is for me in those. I'm not saying it's a waste of time. Please don't, don't interpret that. But I'm just saying that
Right.
um, it's probably more value to have a one-on-one conversation for me personally. But
Mm-hmm.
I would go to those debriefings because somebody else might have a value in it, and there may be something that I can contribute that'll help that person. And so it was always a little conflicted about whether to go to them or not
Right.
when we had 'em. But the value I guess for that is a shared experience. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
that's there. And you'll have people that want to dominate the conversation in those debriefings, and then you'll have people that sit back and are wallflowers in those debriefings.
Right.
And but it's a personalized approach. I think is what you need to develop though
Yeah.
to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. And I can't tell you what's going to work for you, and you can't tell me. And I think it's important to recognize that.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think the
but
debriefs were in the very early stages of our peer support, what we have now. That was, and I think we've developed kind of past that. I think there's still some that will do those debriefs, but like in my department now, it's a one-on-one. I was telling you about the difficult call we had the other day. I had left my shift, was on the way home, and one of my chiefs called me, said, "Hey, just checking in with you. I heard you had a difficult call today." So we don't have these big debriefs as much anymore, and they're starting to focus on this one-on-one more.
yeah.
I think it's found more and more effective.
They're still out there because less than
Mm-hmm.
a year ago, we had a call in Cleveland that involved a couple of pediatric significant injuries and the death. And they did a debrief,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a multi-agency debrief for that incident as well. I wasn't on the call, but, checked on several of the guys that were, you
Mm-hmm.
from that. But that's kind of always the approach we had in the rookie schools was to try to uh, get them aware that uh, these are things you need to address on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
Let's prevent the injury or minimize the injury as much as we can,
Right.
rather than try to be reactive. On the back
Yeah.
end of it.
It's like
After
learning
it's
proper lifting mechanics,
Yeah,
and how to
absolutely,
carry the weight. That's
absolutely.
so.
And there's people
So.
much more qualified than me to handle that. I'm
Yeah.
not the but I just know from personal experience that the personality changes that I can attribute to what I've done for a living, the
Absolutely.
personality flaws, if you will.
Yeah.
You
Oh yeah.
uh, you know, my wife will be the first to tell you that I have a problem with empathy. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a direct relation to what we do for a living. I mean, you think about it. If she has a bad day, the dog made a mess in the house. So if I've had a bad day, somebody died. And
Right.
that's kind of, it's hard to be empathetic to the minor
It
things in
is.
life. Just based on what we do for a living. And so those,
Yeah.
those personality flaws develop, if you will,
Yeah.
and it's hard to put things in perspective with people
It
that
is.
don't do this for a living. So
Yeah. It's because of our lens, like I talked earlier, our lens becomes so skewed. And so here she's looking through her lens and you're trying to see through yours. They're not lining up because what she sees is a big deal. Your pinpoint focus is way down. And so your views of things are not lining up. Say, I saw
right,
mine come through like not only in as a lack of empathy, but I saw mine come through as anger. Anger was the one
yeah,
emotion that I absolutely could show.
hmm
And so when it started affecting my family, when my kids were coming to me and say, why are you so angry all the time? Why are you so mad all the time? Then that's an indication that, hey, you need to start to try to start clearing that lens off a little bit and try to get back some of these emotions that you've pushed away that you don't use when you're in your professional mode.
right,
Um,
right.
so, um, so tell me about some techniques because and we can get into it just as much as you want to, but tell me some techniques that you found effective. I'm sorry, the in navigating a balance of your personal stressors and your professional stressors because we've talked so much about what we deal with at work and how it affects us and like that. Let's look at a different side of this and say on top of all that, now we've got some things going on in our personal life. Share just a little bit about some of your experience, some of the stressors that you've dealt with, and how you created a balance to be able to deal with both, because both of them are going to take very different techniques.
Right, absolutely. So, I'd volunteered for about 10 years before I started doing this for a career.
Right.
Got hired at the end of '98.
Mm-hmm.
In July of '99, I got married, and my wife had a son that was uh, 7 years old at the time, and he had a history of having brain cancer. And
Mm-hmm.
when we got married, everything was good. They had done treatment. His journey had started at 18 months old, and he had carried it a good while. Uh,
But he was in remission though
right,
when you
like
all got
you
married,
call
right?
it remission. They were doing scans and saying they were coming
Yeah.
back clear, all that. So he wasn't under treatment at the time we got married, and he was just a normal little boy,
Mm-hmm.
and I quickly became very attached to him.
We all did. Yeah.
So in 2000, uh, I said he was getting scans. We had a scan and get a phone call a couple days later that, hey, there's something on the scan and we're going to send you to St. Jude's. And so we go out to St. Jude's, and sure enough, his cancer was back. Prognosis was terminal, and um, they did brain surgery, they did radiation. Well, I was fairly new into my career and like that. Well, um, I wasn't going to be anywhere but with him and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So working for the fire department is different than a lot of places. Uh,
Yeah.
we I was afforded the time to be with my family and such, and we spent 8 weeks at St. Jude's.
Mm-hmm.
And, very stressful, high tension time. Yeah, the there's other things that were in play. My wife was very pregnant. My daughter was actually born in Memphis.
Yep.
All the way across the state. Those kind of things. Well, in December of 2000, later in December, I came back to work, and we had come home with a new baby, and Hamden was recovering and um, thought life we were going to get some sense of normalcy. Well, by my recollection, it was my first shift back to the fire department after I'd been out there trying to save my stepson's
Right.
life. And this is 10:30 in the morning. We get called for a house fire. And, you don't think, a daytime fire, there's usually nothing really,
Yeah.
it's a fire. And
Hmm.
uh, we get rolling to it, and the radio traffic starts indicating that maybe there's just something a little more to it than just a fire. And I started gleaning that the sheriff's department was on the scene where this fire was, and that they had a suspect down. That was the original information we were told.
Hmm.
And as we get on the scene, this house set back off the road. There was a car at the end of the driveway, blocking the driveway, and there's a heavy law enforcement presence there. Well, I come off the truck ready to go,
Hmm.
and I meet a female detective in the front yard, and there's mascara running everywhere, and she's extremely distraught. There's kids in there. Well, that changes the game. It ups the ante,
Yeah.
ups the adrenaline, ups the urgency, whatever. And I went through the front door, and my partner was a little slower getting ready than I was. And so I told that one of the police officers was standing there by the door. I said, "Tell him I went right." And I went in the door and started doing a search. And visibility wasn't bad in the house. Smoke's banking down a little bit. It's obvious there's a fire in there, but it's not crazy at this point in time. And I
Hmm.
start down the hallway, and it's a typical ranch style house. You come into the living area, and I went to a hall to the right, and there's a couple bedrooms off the hall. Checked bedroom one, there's nothing there. Checked and counted a bathroom, nothing there. Get to the second bedroom on the left, and it's the one at the end of the hall. It's the last bedroom on that side. The door is cracked open a little bit, starting to get a little smokier. And I started to crawl in there, and I saw something laying on the bed right inside the door. It looked like the barrel of a shotgun.
Hmm.
And I didn't know what the circumstances were, hadn't taken time to know. PD had that, I knew they had something going on, but there was enough of them there that it wasn't going to
Hmm.
affect me. So I get off center of the door, and I reach in there and I grab what I thought was a shotgun barrel, and I pull it, and it's a gas can, and I get a sick feeling. And I crawled into this room, and visibility is greatly decreased in there. And as I start to crawl around the bed, the sheetrock had come down in the ceiling, and so you're looking, and I'm I'm looking through stuff. I'll never forget. I found a little hand, and it was mm, golly bum. That's 20 something years ago. Anyway, I saw a little hand, and I uncovered what I determined to be a body. It is a little girl, and it was very obvious that there was nothing I could do for her. And because I had opened the door in the room, the smoke had gone out. The smoke starts to lift, and I look up from her, and there's another little body there that's burnt really, really bad. I real quick looked around the room. There's nobody else there. There's no viable patients there. I come out and I find the incident commander, who was right outside the door at that point. It was uh, our on-duty battalion chief, and I told him, I said, "Man," I said, "I just found two kids in there," and I said, "They're both gone." I told him where they were. Well, I'd come out at the end of the house under the carport. So that bed at the end of the hallway, there was an exterior door. And laying there on the ground is the suspect. Yeah, and he's deceased. The
Okay.
first emotion I felt beyond the helplessness of being able to do anything with the situation was anger, right? This guy just threw these two kids away.
Right.
It went through my mind to go over there and stomp a mud hole in it. I'm just being totally honest about what I felt,
Yeah.
and told myself, hey, you're a professional, act like it. Swallow this stuff, pull yourself together, and do your job. That's what the culture was in the industry. I'm not speaking ill of our department because that's the way it was across the board. You're a professional, do your job.
Yeah.
Um, Scene rocked on. We did our thing. They had to, all the investigations had to occur and all that. My engineer on the truck that day, our lieutenant was off, and my engineer on the truck that day, he knew that this was going to screw with me.
Right.
And he got me out of the scene. He went and talked to the battalion chief, and I left. I went back to the station, and this is hour and a half, 2 hours into it, honestly. But
Mhm.
all of that to be said, how does your personal stressor and your work life come together and intersect and compound it?
Yeah.
With this guy had killed his children, and he was the biological father, and he'd killed these children. He threw his children away for no good reason. Two perfectly healthy, beautiful children. And we were fighting like hell to keep ours alive.
Right.
And yeah, you can tell, what that did, what that does. At this point in time, I've been in the business for 10 or 12 years, including volunteer time and all that. And I'd seen some bad stuff. And,
Yeah.
you have some of that stuff that the night of the call, it may be hard to sleep, but it wasn't stuff that stayed with you. Well, about 6 months later, we had rented a cabin in Gatlinburg with my in-laws, and
Hmm.
Hamden was there, and all and all that. We were having a good time. Nothing was on the radar as far as stressors, work, or anything. 2 o'clock in the morning, I ran that call again.
Yeah.
Don't know what triggered it. First time I've ever dreamed about a call,
Mhm.
and it. Uh, I woke up in a cold sweat because I had just found that little hand again,
Yeah.
and that was that was some stuff, and Ham had passed away in 2002. Um, the kid calls were rough on me, for
Yeah.
that. Uh, but that one was one that I could look back on and say that one affected my mental health. And I'm not saying it wouldn't have affected it without the other stressors, but I'm going to say that uh, all that compounding,
Yeah.
um, it definitely made it harder to deal with, and like that. And as life goes on and you get more experience and those scars get thicker, things don't affect you as much. Well, I say don't affect you, but they don't. You don't have that instantaneous effect.
Mhm.
You get calloused and all of that, and that stuff tends to fester on the inside instead of on the outside. You know,
Yep.
so uh, tools to um, relieve it. It's kind of the same thing. Whether it's a call or whether it's a personal stressor, you got to do the things. You got to deal with the stressors in your life, regardless of the source, right? And I think that's
Right.
that's kind of I had to find people to talk to, and I'm not necessarily, and maybe I should, but I'm not necessarily the one that seeks out therapy, professional help. I tend to um, just need a ear sometimes,
Right.
even with the personal stressors as well. I just need an ear, somebody that can listen to me and hear me out,
Hmm.
and talk about what my stressors are, and I try to uh, be that person for other people, so it's a reciprocal kind of thing. But because it kind of, yeah, I need somebody to hear me out. It sounds a little selfish, but you try to be a little reciprocal with it as well. As you
Right.
get more experience, you know. So that's
Yeah.
probably
I
the
want.
best I can offer. But those are
Yeah.
uh, uh, when you the people at work that I encountered that had difficulty dealing with calls. It's because they could relate it in some way to something personal, right? The
Mhm.
firefighter with young children that goes on a kid call, right? They can
Yeah.
relate it to it. They CPR for somebody's grandmother, and it looks like their grandmother, or
Right.
it's somebody or these kind of things. If it gets tied back to your personal life, then it definitely is going to have that acute effect on you. you know.
Right.
So,
I want to back up to when you talked about when you came out of the house
mm,
and you saw the suspect there and the anger that you felt and what you mentally wanted to do to him. And I want to preface that by saying, it's okay to feel the anger. There's
mhm,
nothing wrong with feeling that anger. That's a normal human emotion as a response to a extreme. That's the protector in you. You wanted to protect the children, and the thing is that you chose the professional and not to act on that anger.
right.
That in plays turns back and plays into when this stuff starts to resurface in our head and we start, trying to process some of this, is that we react to it physically in the proper way. It's okay to feel the sadness. It's okay to feel the sorrow, the what we might consider as negative emotions and the anger and the frustration. It's okay to feel that. We just need to make sure that we act on it in a professional manner and that we act on it in a proper manner is to relieve those emotions and in doing it the correct way that benefits us and benefits the others around us.
Mhm,
So I thought about that when you were talking about feeling that, and I thought, so many times we feel our emotions are wrong, and that's the culture and the stigmatism that has been brought up through emergency services all these years that you're not allowed to have these emotions, that it shows a weakness or an instability, and that's just not the case. It's a normal human reaction. If you took somebody that was not a first responder, placed them in that same situation, nobody would think another thought if they
mhm,
shared the same emotions that you just expressed. Nobody would think another thought about, the they could end up in being committed somewhere and everybody go, well, you see what they dealt with?
yeah.
It doesn't surprise me they ended up there. But for a first responder, we're supposed to pack it away in our backpack and keep moving.
Mhm,
And so but that was part of the stigmatism that we've dealt with for years, that now we're starting to see that shaved away little by little. And we're saying, hey, these guys are human too. We've got to help them process this because not only, and I'll just ask you, in 38 years, Pete, was that the only bad call that you've had?
no,
So there's much more in that backpack, just another call.
no,
And,
absolutely.
you know, one of the other guests brought up the point that the average person might see one or two of those in a lifetime.
Mhm,
We might see four before lunch,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So that's very important to realize about what we do, is that it's definitely not normal, and we can't be expected to handle it like a normal person.
right.
So, explain to me how you feel about large personal stressors that you had in your personal life. The Hamden, and then there's many more that I know of that you haven't shared, but so I know you've got some really large personal stressors, and then your professional stressors. Once you start to manage those stressors and everything, did you see a change in how you managed either one of those, versus when you start compiling trauma after trauma after trauma at work, and then you have big stress, big stress, big stress at home. Tell me how it changed you as a person once you started to learn how to balance those.
You know, and I don't know that I'm a good example of balancing those, honestly. You know, uh, my reaction, there again, it's a character trait, if you will, but
Yeah.
um, when things start getting stressful, um, number one, I want to solve the problem and walk away from it, right? And I don't. That's the firefighter psyche, I guess. You go on the call, you
Hmm.
handle the call, you get in the service, and go back to the station and finish your dinner or whatever.
Right.
I mean, and
Right.
and I think that carries over, and maybe doing this all my adult life carried over, but that's my psyche. I want to handle the problem and return to normalcy, right? And
Hmm.
so that's, like I said, I don't know that I'm a best example of that. But what I found myself doing was throwing myself into work, and
Okay.
you just got to keep busy. And there again, like I said, I don't know how healthy that is. And I mean, 25 years later, I'm tearing up talking about a call.
Yeah.
But I always try to just fill my brain with something else. Fill my hard drive with something else. And
Hmm.
um, I wanted to deal with the stressor and then move
Right.
on. And so I wasn't opposed to talking to somebody, did the things that I do, but then I want to be able to just say, on to the next problem, right? And
Yeah.
so that's I don't know if that's the ultimate solution, but that's kind of the way that I deal
Right.
with things. So
When you said it, it made me think of and I'm going to be very general here, but it made me think of a story that you told me about a call that you dealt with where somebody lost their life, and there was a family member that connected somehow through your family, and they wanted to contact you and to, I guess, get details of the incident or
now it
something of
really
that
to
nature,
just
but
that one they just
they
wanted to
wanted to
show,
connect with you.
show their appreciation for respectfully handling their loved one, because that was the context of how they became aware that I was on the call.
Right.
And yeah, that created a discussion.
It
Uh,
did.
and basically, what I said was that for a living, uh, I've visited tragedies on a fairly frequent basis. That's
Hmm.
that's what we said on the onset. About
Right.
when you sign that dotted line, you're accepting that you're going to see the worst scenarios and the worst situations, and by choosing to do this for a living, that's the nature of what the job is. And basically, what I had to tell a family member is I cannot make every tragedy my tragedy, right?
Right.
If I personalize everything, if I look for a reason to personalize every bad call that I go on, I'm
Hmm.
really going to be a wreck,
Absolutely.
and it's uh, that disassociative approach, I guess. Healthy or not healthy, it's the reality of what you do and the
Right.
sheer volume of what you do. You have to be able
Hmm.
to draw that line and keep that separate. That's not me. I didn't know that person ahead of time, and yes, it's sad. And yes, the circumstances are awful. But when I walk away from that, I don't want to go to the funeral of somebody I didn't know just because I responded to that call.
Right.
That's for me personally. That's not. That's not healthy for me.
Hmm.
Some other people, it may be. It may be closure for somebody else that's in a business, and that goes back to what I said. Well, what works for you might not work for me. As far as
Absolutely. Yeah. No
processing
template.
things. You know, and it's true. But that was always the thing that I said was every tragedy can't be my personal tragedy, because
Right.
I can't carry that burden. You know.
Right. And that prolongs your healing too. You were saying that the way that you tend to process things is that you deal with them rather quickly and then walk away from them. and put them
Hmm.
behind you. And so by this dragging out and having to discuss with a family member or go to a funeral or whatever, that just prolongs your process of dealing with this. Now,
Hmm.
like you said, on the other hand, somebody may need that longer process to be able to deal with it. But
Yeah.
so but when you said that you like to deal with it rather quickly and then just put it behind you and move on, it made me think of that because it that made a prolonged process for you to be able to wash that call. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of the same way in most of the aspects that I deal with calls. I've always said that I don't look it's as morbid as it might sound. I don't look at my patients as people. I look at them as patients,
Hmm.
um, because that way I try to prevent myself becoming emotionally involved in their situation.
Yeah.
I answer the call. I do what I'm trained to do. I take care of them. And then when I drop them off at the hospital, I walk away. 95% of the time, I don't want to follow up.
Right.
I don't need to follow up with this patient. We've got places in our software where we can request a follow up on a patient. And I'll be honest with you, unless there is a clinical need for me to have follow up on that patient, unless I want to know, man, I wonder what ended up being wrong with this patient or whatever. Nope, I don't want to know. I don't
Yeah.
want to know,
Yeah.
because I don't need to know.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, from the patient care aspect of it, with me, take care of them as best as I can, as best as my training allows, and all of that. And my closure is the handoff, right?
Yep,
That's my
yep,
closure. Is as bad as the circumstances are, and the handoff may not be to a higher level of care. It might be to the coroner, right?
yeah,
But I put my hands on what's got to be done and take the best
yep,
care of them as I can. And the handoff is my closure. Close the book.
yeah,
Let's get ready for the next one.
yep,
And that's what facilitated that whole thing was, rather than the younger guys have to do a hard job
hmm,
and put something in their backpack, me and another experienced guy stepped in and handled that patient, that victim, with the utmost respect and took care of that person or their remains, if you will, in a manner that we would want our loved one taken care of.
right,
That was my version of taking care of that victim was
yeah,
you know just doing what we do and showing them respect. And it's not roadkill, right?
right.
It was a
It's a
person and it's
person.
somebody's loved one. And
Hmm.
um, I would want that comfort of knowing that somebody took care of my family member with that respect as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So now that you're retired, um, how do you feel like your stress level has changed professionally and personally? Because now that you're retired, I say maybe you've got more time at home, but you still work in a different field now, but still working. But I I want to know if being retired from the fire department now his I know that stress level has dropped, but how has your stress level at home dropped as a result of you retiring, and are you seeing any of those stressors reappear? That's something that we've talked about, is that sometimes when people retire, when they finally come out of that hyper vigilant mode, that some of this stuff starts to pop its head up, and we because we're not mentally as protected inside as we were when we were active.
Personally, I haven't encountered that, as
Hmm.
far as stuff rearing its ugly head. It's
Right.
hard to talk about the story I told, but
Yeah.
as far as day to day, I really haven't encountered that. There's a huge sense of relief, right?
Hmm.
When I go to bed at night, I don't have to worry about the buzzer going off or my phone ringing or the things that I've lived with for so long, and it's there's just a weird interior sense of relief for me that, whew, I can take a breath, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that hypervigilance, word that you used, I think that's probably pretty accurate, because now all of a sudden I can relax,
Right.
And there, towards the end of my career, I'll be honest with you, I was desperately seeking avenues to relax.
Yeah.
I felt myself so keyed up, and this is when I knew it was time for me to step aside, because I would feel myself so keyed up all the time, and it's just like it's like the Charlie horse you can't get rid of, right? You're
Right.
so tense it hurts almost, and you desire that avenue to go, whew,
Hmm.
and even when you get it in that setting, it's just temporary, right? You go.
Right.
I'd go to the hunting camp for the weekend or whatever, and it's like, oh, I can relax. But
But
then
then right back
Sunday
into
evening
it.
when I drive home, when I'm going back to work Monday morning, it's here we go again. And
Hmm.
uh, I think that's probably, and I would say if you talk to my wife, she would tell you the same thing. That's when I came to the realization that. I've got my time in. I've met the requirements to draw an appropriate pension, and
Yeah.
it's time for me to move along. It's just time.
Yep.
And I'm not saying, right now I'm not doing anything in emergency services per se, but and I'm not saying I never will, but I'm going to take a little while before I really get back involved in something to
Right.
enjoy this relaxation that I was so desperately seeking there,
Yeah.
3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah. Well, you're getting a huge mental break. It's you can you can shut down at night when you go to sleep,
Yeah,
and that's got to mean a lot for your quality of sleep, which
yeah.
we know is something that we need physically and mentally
hmm
enormously there.
And there's still the day-to-day life stressors.
Hmm.
There's things going on in my life that produce stress that, just like anybody else. It's all a level of severity or what have you. But
Hmm.
but the work side of it is uh, afforded me now the opportunity to take a breath and,
Right.
and
I
relax a
know
little
you
bit.
you still got or personal stressors that are still packing a pretty heavy punch, but at least you're starting to see some relief on the other side. And
Right,
and it also gives you more mental space to be able to focus on your personal stressors,
right,
um, because that work stuff, man, it'll occupy a lot of your mind.
right. Absolutely, absolutely.
So Um, something that we've talked about quite a bit is of course, the stigmatism that's been on first responders all these years of, the kind of the tough guy mentality, and, everything is supposed to roll off our backs, like that. What do you think what changes do you feel would be effective in us continuing to wear away from that stigmatism and that mentality? What would you, now is stepping away from administration and like that, what would be something that maybe you would recommend to the chief that took your spot? Let's just say you were he came to you for, or she came to you for counsel and said, hey, what would you recommend to them in helping and change this culture?
I think the onset of peer support. Our department started a peer support program several years ago.
Right.
Um, we administratively we were real careful to keep a separation with that, and not be. We wanted to provide support for it, but we
Right.
didn't want. There's a lot of times there's a distrust of management. In any
Absolutely.
industry, and we
Yep.
didn't want that to hinder the work that was being done. And so
Right.
uh, we tried to facilitate as much as we can and could in the background, supporting that program. Um,
Right.
but we let the peer support group choose their own leadership for
Hmm.
their group, and we didn't get our fingers in that.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that not too long ago they had a pretty rough call that they did a critical incident briefing about. I was careful not to mandate that our crews went to that. That was
Right.
kind of one of the things. It's here, it's available. We'll make arrangements if you want to go. If part of the crew wants to go and part of them doesn't want to do, we'll make those arrangements. We'll figure it out. Those kind of
Hmm.
things. Um, they did peer support meetings where, educational type things for groups, not
Right.
associated with a call and like that. A lot of times I would breeze in, make my presence known, and breeze out, and let it,
Yeah.
trying to keep that separation, but show
Yeah.
that, hey, we're on board with this, and like that. The style of leadership I had, what I tried to do, and this was a learning experience. I definitely wasn't perfect at it, and I learned as we went. Uh, but if I knew there was a bad call, I wanted to go back and check on these guys, not just the day of the call, but down the road.
Right.
Just a little, just to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to take care of themselves, and that they and
Hmm.
let them understand that the resources are here if you're struggling with it, and we're not thinking anything. You know, we want to take care of you, just like
Hmm.
just like an on the job injury, physical injury. We want to take care of you, and
Right.
that's I think that's probably as important as anything. And it's hard. It's hard for an old school guy like me, a lot of times that grew up in a different culture.
Yeah.
Honestly, to uh,
Yeah.
to kind of change that a little bit. You kind of,
Hmm.
well, that call wasn't that bad. Why
Right.
why is he struggling? That call wasn't that bad. I've seen so much worse. It's
Right.
hard to keep that from creeping in, if you will, sometimes.
Hmm.
But you've got to make a conscious effort to be aware that, hey, I don't know what's going on in their personal life, or I may not
Right.
know what's going on in their personal life, and I don't
Right.
know what stressors are compounding this, if you will. And this
Right.
job's not for everybody. I had a guy, a rookie. He wasn't a rookie. He went through rookie school. I taught his rookie school. Um, Less than 2 years in, I had him sit in my office and look me in the eye and said, "Pete, this isn't for me." And we talked about it. And, are you sure it's not for you? Why do you say that? And he explained, and he had had a run of bad calls.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't for him, honestly. I mean, he ended up moving along, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And I
Yeah.
told him that. I said, "Look, this is not a failure on your part." I said, "You got the reality check of what you're doing and what you're going
Hmm.
to encounter." I said, "And there's other career fields out there, and there's other fields out there that you can help people without having to encounter these tragedies." And
Right.
he moved along to working with kids, with you, and
Yeah.
uh, I totally get it, but somebody's got to do this job, right? I mean,
Right.
there's got to be
Right.
somebody that shows up when you have the wreck on the interstate, or the or
Yeah.
the the fire, or what have you.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that, this job is certainly not made for everybody. There, it was really interesting. There's a therapist that we talked to in a previous episode, and she said that it's only about 1% of people that are cut out to do this kind of work. And from that 1%, there's a high percentage of those people that got into this business, and this is not everybody's reasoning, but because they felt like they needed a voice, and this is their voice that. And I thought, man, that describes me a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like this is my voice, this is my contribution to the world as a conversation. But this is me being able to put mine in.
Yeah.
And but just as much as some of these calls take away from us, I feel like there's a lot of calls that put back into me. You know, that baby that I got, that I was able to deliver, and that baby that we did CPR on and got back. And it is now oh my gosh, she's probably 5 or 6 years old now, but seeing her live a normal, healthy life because we were able to get to her in time and able to use the training that we had. Though, those things that pours back into me on the positive side. And so,
Hmm.
and to me, in my head, they far outweigh the bad
Oh,
things. And
absolutely.
that's why I keep doing this. I'm 20 27, 28 years in to doing, fire and EMS stuff. And as long as my body will hold out, I'll keep doing it,
Yeah.
because I still get poured into with it, and I still get poured into with it. And that makes a huge difference to me.
Yeah.
Um,
You said that, I was thinking about a call we had years ago, and you were probably on it. This was way back in the volunteer days. And we're
uh,
doing an extrication south of town one night, and it was a head-on collision, and there's a female patient trapped in the driver's seat of one of the vehicles. And we took the
mhm,
door off, and because of the way they'd hit, she's come off the seat. And when we took the door off, she's trying to fall out of the car, but her feet are still tangled up in there.
yeah,
I slid in there and held that lady in my lap until we could get free her completely.
yeah,
And uh, it was a prolonged thing. My legs were cramped, and it was one of those deals that had to have somebody help me stand up when we got her out of there. Those kind of
yeah.
things. But a month or two later, uh, Mom had encountered this lady somewhere at church or something. I don't, and
Hmm.
she remembered that I had held her in my lap until they could free her. And when that came full circle, I don't know, it just felt good that you had made a difference and somebody remembered you personally making that difference for them.
Oh yeah.
That
Oh yeah.
was so satisfying. And there's examples of that. And if there weren't, we wouldn't do this, right? I mean,
Exactly.
you've
Yep.
got to have some success at some point,
Yeah.
or you're not going to do this. But
Hmm.
that was probably one of the earlier ones that I remember was, and
Yeah.
she was telling our mother that how appreciative she was, knowing, I guess she probably felt my legs jumping, honestly, getting pent up, but knowing that,
Yeah.
somebody was there to make sure that she had the support she needed
Hmm.
physically until they could free her, that kind of thing.
Right.
So,
Yep. Well, Pete, we're probably going to wrap things up here. But is there any key information that you'd like to share related to first responder mental health, or I mean, for that matter, anything? If you just want to put a little bit of frosting on the cake here as we're leaving, that we'd love to hear it from 30, almost 40 years of experience. We just throw something out there for us.
uh, well, all I'd say is all the tough stuff that we've talked about today. At the end of the day, I'm tickled to death that I chose it for a career. It's a
Yeah.
very fulfilling and satisfying career.
Yep.
When things go bad, being one of the people that step up to do something about it and help fix it,
Right.
there's a certain amount of satisfaction to it.
Absolutely.
I've told classes before. I said there's two kinds of people in this world when you have one of them oh crap moments. Uh, there's the people that stand back and wring their hands or get their phones out, or are spectators, basically, or there's
Yeah.
people that jump in and try to solve the problem. And being one
Right.
of those people that jump in and try to solve the problem, and doing that for almost 40 years, uh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of satisfaction to it. And I wouldn't want anything we've said today, any of this tough stuff that we've talked about. I wouldn't want it to dissuade somebody who's
Uh,
looking at this as a potential career, is something that they might want to do, because in the end of the day, there's a lot of satisfaction to it, and I've got a lot of respect for those character traits, personality traits that lead somebody into this business. I mean, honestly.
yeah, absolutely. And no, I don't want to dissuade anybody from it. The whole purpose behind this is that this is the job that we choose to do. This is what the life that we choose to be involved in. And it comes with, you know, known baggage. But the purpose here is to learn how to deal with that baggage in the correct way.
Mhm.
And so if there's a rookie or somebody new looking at getting into this type of work or whatever, by all means, if you have a heart for it, get in. I tell people all the time, I love having students come and ride on the truck with me. I love it. And especially ones that have a drive and a zeal for this. If you show a thirst for knowledge and a heart for this business, I'll pour everything I have into you. because I want somebody to have the same experiences that I've had, because the good does outweigh the bad. But, the thing is that there is bad, and we just need to learn how to deal with it properly.
There's
And
bad
so
in every
that
job, right?
there is bad in every job,
A coal miner goes down in the coal mines knowing that his lungs are, he's getting that dust.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a calculated risk. It's an
Yep.
accepted condition of what he does. It's
Yep.
there's potential for it in anything you do.
Yeah. And just as a coal miner takes that risk and goes down in there and may have to wear a respirator down there to prevent from getting, lung disease, we've got to learn how to deal with this stuff up here to help us to prevent from getting that mental trauma effect. And
Right.
the problem is that we went for so many years not dealing with it. So now we're playing catch up to where we can get to a point to where we're doing preventative measures to learn those proper lifting mechanics for our brain,
Right.
to prevent that injury and to prevent that stuff. And I think eventually, hopefully, that we'll get there. But we're still playing catch up from all the years of just being a tough guy and lifting that box any old way that we could lift it. And so we got a lot of people with back injuries now, type, just a comparison. But but thanks so much for coming on, Pete, and sharing your experiences. There's some, we could talk for days and days about different calls and different things that we've dealt with and how they affected us. So, but I really thank you for coming on and just giving us a peek inside and for sharing some techniques with us. You guys, dealing with this stuff is something that we're striving to do better and better every day. If you're having something that's sticking with you, if you're having some type of effects from this stuff, please reach out. If you've got a department with a peer support, don't hesitate to reach out to the peer support person. My email's up here, folks. Send me an email, reach out to me on social media, and I've got some resources that I can point you in the direction of, and we'll try to get this dealt with, because we don't want you to either leave the business, or we don't want you to do something negative in your life. We need you well. Your communities need you well. And we want you functioning properly to do the job that we love so much. But Pete, thanks so much for coming out. Folks, this is Under the Helmet. I'm your host, Josh VanDusen. Y'all have a wonderful day.